I sat frozen at table 14, the white roses blurring around me as the bride's words cut through the ballroom. Too broke to buy a toaster, she laughed, and 200 people laughed with her. My own brother stared at his plate. No one knew that while she mocked me, I was worth more than this entire wedding combined. No one knew that every clause, every dollar, every legacy was already locked, and she would never touch a dime of it. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The chandeliers glittered too much. The whole ballroom at the Bellevue Hotel was drenched in white roses and hollow laughter. Eleanor sat at table 14, napkin stiff across her lap, dress a shade too dark for a wedding. She stirred her iced water absently, eyes on the head table. Madison clinked her champagne flute. The bride's voice rang out like a bell laced with vinegar. I just want to thank everyone for coming, she beamed, pausing for effect. Especially my new sister-in-law, Eleanor, who flew in from— Where is it now? Oh, right, nowhere. She's been between jobs. A ripple of awkward laughter scattered across the room. Some guests glanced down, others chuckled nervously, unsure if it was safe. Jason, sitting beside Madison in his tailored tux, stared at his plate. His jaw tightened, barely. He didn't look at Eleanor. Eleanor's smile didn't crack. She inhaled once, deep and silent, her spine like steel beneath the fabric of her navy sheath dress. Madison went on, swaying slightly, champagne glass still raised. And if anyone's wondering why the happy couple didn't get a toaster, it's because Eleanor couldn't afford one. This time, the laughter came louder. The bride had delivered it with perfect comedic timing. A few of Jason's fraternity friends hooted. One slapped the table. Ruth, Eleanor's aunt, reached beneath the white linen tablecloth and squeezed her niece's hand. Her touch was warm, steady, unapologetic. Eleanor didn't look at her. She stood, quietly. No scrape of chair legs, no clinking of silverware. Just a movement, smooth, deliberate, like something inevitable sliding into place. She reached for her champagne glass. The ballroom lights caught the rim, the golden fizz, the faint tremble of her hand. Her expression was unreadable, serene almost. To Madison and Jason, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a scalpel. Silence followed. Then a few glasses lifted in scattered mimicry. Madison's smile faltered, confused by the lack of reaction. Eleanor held her glass higher. I'm not broke, she said, voice calm as snowfall. Not even close. And she smiled, but not at Madison, not at Jason. She smiled at the space between them, the gap that would never fully close, no matter how expensive the wedding, how perfect the photography, how many toasts were made. Then she drank. The bubbles touched her lips, cold, crisp, elegant. She set the glass down with quiet precision. No one spoke, not Madison, not Jason. The band in the corner struck up a soft Sinatra number, too late, too forced. The noise returned, but it didn't fill the room the same way. Madison turned to Jason, mouth tight, eyes narrowed. You're going to talk to her. Jason didn't answer. Across the room, Eleanor walked calmly toward the exit, heels silent on the carpet. Just before she reached the door, she glanced over her shoulder. Only once. Jason was watching her, and in that split second, he looked like he remembered something he wasn't supposed to. Rain ticked against the windows like impatient fingers. The Bellevue's wedding lights were miles away now, both in distance and in meaning. Eleanor sat cross-legged in the center of her living room floor. A battered lockbox opened beside her. The glow from a single floor lamp carved soft shadows across the hardwood. Around her, neatly stacked manila folders, black binders, and one thick leather portfolio tied with a ribbon no one had touched since the funeral. She reached for a file labeled Blue Ridge Trust, flipping it open with methodical calm, page after page. Real estate holdings, equity positions, mineral rights from parcels no one in the family even remembered existed. Next came Victor's brokerage records, his quarterly letters still signed in fountain pen, printed on thick, cream stock. Your portfolio has exceeded expectations. Conservative growth strategies remain effective. No action required. She brushed her thumb lightly across the ink. The apartment was silent, except for the whisper of pages turning and the muted hum of rain. She had never needed much. A studio that faced north, simple groceries, a 10-year-old sedan with a cracked windshield, and a glove box full of expired insurance cards. When Victor died, the condolences had come in flower arrangements and pitying looks, as if she'd been left with nothing but the shadow of a good man. They had no idea. She reached for the black binder next, Midwestern Properties, LLC. She had forgotten about that one. 8 rentals in Indiana, rented out, fully paid off, low maintenance. She ran her finger along the spreadsheet margins, tenants paid on time. Year after year, it had never been about accumulation. It had been about protection. Photos peeked out from beneath a document sleeve. Victor at Lake Chelan, laughing beside a campfire, ashes smeared on his cheek. Another of him in a beat-up blazer, holding a bottle of cheap Merlot in front of their first apartment. Her hand hovered over them for a moment, then folded the images back into the binder. Madison's voice echoed faintly from the cavern of memory. Couldn't even buy a toaster. Eleanor's lips twitched, not quite a smile. She reached for a legal pad, opened to a blank page, and wrote a single name across the top in sharp, deliberate print. The Madison file. She underlined it once, then again. She set the pen down and leaned back, spine against the cold wall. Eyes closed. Rain still whispering. She had been quiet too long. Let them write their own versions. Let them assume weakness was lack. That absence meant insignificance. No more. She opened her eyes. She wants money, Eleanor said softly, voice almost lost to the storm. Let's see her choke on none. Then she reached for the drawer Victor never let anyone touch. The key had stayed with her ever since he died. She opened it now. Inside, among the layers of safety envelopes and estate instructions, was a sealed white envelope. It had her name on it, handwritten, in Victor's slanted print. She stared at it for a long time before touching it, and when she did, her fingertips went cold. The downtown office smelled faintly of bergamot and lemon polish. Rainwater from Eleanor's coat left a soft ring on the marble table, but she didn't wipe it away. She sat with her hands folded, spine straight. The envelope from Victor lay unopened in her purse. Clara Rhodes stepped in precisely on time. She was younger than Eleanor remembered, maybe mid-30s now, but still carried herself like the courtroom was an extension of her bones. Hair slicked into a low bun, navy sheath dress, gold watch, the kind of woman who made no apologies and took no prisoners. Eleanor, Clara smiled, eyes scanning her client's face like she was reading a deposition. It's been a while. 15 years, Eleanor said. You helped Victor set up the initial family trust. And you haven't touched it since, Clara noted, already pulling up digital files on her tablet. Everything's still under your maiden name. I'd say that's a kind of genius in itself. Eleanor slid a folder across the table. I want to make changes. Clara opened it. Real estate ledgers, brokerage summaries, corporate shares, meticulously annotated in Eleanor's sharp cursive. The kind of paperwork that didn't lie. She looked impressed. You've been quiet. Not anymore. Clara leaned back, flipping through the documents with clinical focus. You want to move assets? No, I want to lock them. A pause. Clara looked up. Eleanor's expression didn't shift. Clara gestured for clarification. Eleanor inhaled once. You ever had someone humiliate you in front of 200 people? Someone who knows nothing about you, who sneers while they slice you open with a smile? Clara's brow twitched. What happened? My brother's wife, at their wedding. She joked about me being too poor to buy a toaster. Eleanor said the word like it was poison. She said it twice, to laughter. Clara nodded slowly. I've seen that kind of cruelty dressed up in pearls before. She thinks I'm weak, irrelevant. Eleanor's voice didn't rise. She made it very public. And you'd like to make her very absent. Eleanor met her gaze. Legally. Permanently. Clara smiled like a blade being unsheathed. We can make her vanish. A new file appeared on the tablet. Clara started drafting. Let's begin with a living trust. We'll amend the original, but this time, you'll have total control over disbursement. Jason remains a conditional beneficiary. You choose the terms. But Madison, gone. I want it airtight. It will be. Clara's fingers moved with precision. No challenge clause, no fallback provisions. The assets pass to scholarship funds, local literacy programs, domestic violence shelters, should Jason fail to meet certain conditions. Eleanor's hands were steady. What kind of conditions? He can't access anything if he's still married to her, Clara said simply. We'll make that enforceable. If he divorces and meets the integrity standards we lay out, partial reinstatement. You decide the bar, Eleanor nodded. Good. You want to add a philanthropic executor? Yes, but only posthumous. Everything stays silent until I'm gone. Clara looked up. You're planning something. I'm planning everything. They worked in silence for a while. Clara inputted clause after clause, while Eleanor edited with pen and ink. No emotion, no second-guessing. Then, as Clara was finalizing the trust index, she looked up again. Do you want her to know? Eleanor didn't speak for a long time. Rain clinked gently against the tall windows. She'll know, she said at last, but not until it's far too late to fix it. Clara smiled, then slid a page across the table. Then you should read this clause closely, because this is how you make sure she inherits nothing. Ever. Eleanor picked up the paper, read it, and nodded once. She signed with the same pen she'd used to write the Madison file. Clara gathered the documents. I'll courier duplicates by Friday. Eleanor stood, slipping the unopened envelope from her purse. She ran her fingers across Victor's name one last time. You ever lose someone who left behind secrets? She asked. Clara tilted her head. Once. My father. After the funeral, we found a safety deposit box. Inside was a photo of a woman we never met, and a house deed from 1989. Eleanor almost smiled. Then you'll understand what this might be. She tucked the envelope back into her bag. Clara watched her go. Don't wait too long to open it. Eleanor's heels echoed down the hallway. But when she stepped into the elevator and the doors slid shut, she didn't press the lobby button. She pressed B2. Victor's private safe hadn't been opened in over 2 years, and the key was still cold in her coat pocket. The cafe was all reclaimed wood and overpriced herbs, somewhere between rustic and ruthless, just like Madison. Eleanor chose a seat by the window. She didn't remove her coat. Madison arrived exactly 7 minutes late, sunglasses still on, hair pulled back in a high ponytail like a debutante running late to court. She kissed the air beside Eleanor's cheek and slid into the booth like they were girlfriends meeting after yoga. You look rested, Madison said, flagging down a server without looking. You look rehearsed, Eleanor replied. Madison laughed, just loud enough for the neighboring table to glance over. I wanted to catch up, just the two of us. I know the wedding had some weird energy. Eleanor said nothing. She stirred her coffee with slow, deliberate circles. A tiny red light blinked from the clasp of her leather purse beside her. Madison continued. Jason and I were talking. Well, mostly me. And I thought, maybe it's time we helped each other. Eleanor looked up. You first. Madison tilted her head like she'd just been invited to dance. You've got that old townhouse. Big one. Kind of a lot to manage on your own. I managed just fine. I'm sure, Madison said sweetly, resting her chin on her hand. But long term, wouldn't it be smarter to put it in Jason's name? You know, just to protect it from probate, or the state, or whatever happens. Eleanor's expression didn't flicker. Interesting suggestion. Think of it as legacy planning, Madison chirped. You wouldn't want strangers getting their hands on it after. She let the sentence drift. Eleanor took a sip of coffee. After what? Madison's smile thinned. Well, you're not exactly young anymore. God forbid something happens. Stroke, fall. Those care homes suck everything dry. We'd hate to see you lose the house to a Medicaid clawback. Eleanor set the cup down gently. The red light blinked again. Still recording. So Jason would own it. Just on paper, Madison purred. You'd still live there. Nothing would change. But with things the way they are, financially, it'd give us peace of mind. We? Madison's eyes sparkled. Family peace of mind. A pause. Then Eleanor leaned forward slightly. You think I'll be drooling into a tray in 6 months, don't you? Madison blinked. What? Eleanor's voice dropped, low and calm. That I'll be shuffling around in compression socks while you measure the windows for new curtains. Madison's tone cooled. You're twisting my words. No, Eleanor said, reaching for her bag. I'm preserving them. The tiny recorder stopped with a soft beep as she slipped it back inside. This conversation, she added, has been enlightening. Madison's composure slipped for the first time. Are you threatening me? Not at all, Eleanor stood, buttoned her coat. I'm just documenting my decline, one brunch at a time. Without another word, she left. Clara tapped the space bar and the audio played again. The recording hissed softly. Then Madison's voice came through, honey-dipped, razor-edged. You wouldn't want strangers getting their hands on it after whatever happens. Eleanor sat across from Clara, arms folded, expression carved from granite. Clara stopped the playback. She tried to set you up for a fraudulent conveyance. The tone alone implies coercion. This tape proves intent. She wants control, and she's stupid enough to try sweet-talking her way into it. She's trying to bury me alive, Eleanor said, smiling while she hands me the shovel. Clara nodded. This is admissible. If she pushes again, if she tries any legal maneuvering or asset pressure, we'll bury her first. Eleanor looked out Clara's office window. The rain had stopped. The city sparkled under afternoon light, sharp, unforgiving, transparent. She reached into her purse, hand grazing past the recorder, the pen, the trust documents, until her fingers closed around the sealed white envelope she still hadn't opened. Whatever Victor had left her, it waited like a sleeping wire under everything else. The signature pages were thick stock ivory, bound with brass corners like a will from another century. Clara laid them out on the long oak table one by one, each section indexed with surgical precision. Her office blinds were drawn tight, blocking the late afternoon sun that burned over the skyline like a silent witness. Eleanor set her reading glasses on the bridge of her nose. She didn't need them, but this wasn't about need. It was about detail. Final draft, Clara said, her voice smooth but firm. It reflects every clause you signed off on. Eleanor didn't respond. She was already scanning the first page, the preamble, the named trustees, the irrevocable designation, everything locked, bound, and court-proofed. Jason remains listed, Clara continued, tapping a highlighted line, but only if he's legally divorced from Madison by the time of your passing. No exceptions. If not, all inheritance is forfeited and rerouted to the secondary beneficiaries. And those are? Eleanor asked, eyes still scanning. Clara clicked her pen. The Historical Society in Princeton, the Women's Law Scholarship Fund at Rutgers, and the Preservation Trust for the Cranford Archives. You mentioned your grandmother's work on that. Eleanor's gaze flicked upward. She spent 20 years cataloging those files. Madison called them dust trophies. Then now they're gold-plated, Clara replied, without missing a beat. Eleanor allowed herself a breath, measured, quiet. And this, she asked, tapping a discreet section near the bottom. Asset protection vehicle. Victor's doing, Clara said. He moved the majority of your joint holdings into an offshore trust 3 months before he passed. He named you as the sole lifetime beneficiary. It's already been audited and verified. Eleanor went still. He never told me. Clara gave a soft nod. Some men leave flowers. Victor left layered security protocols and tax-shielded portfolios. Eleanor touched the signature line, but didn't lift the pen yet. Once this is filed, Clara said, it becomes public record. Not the terms, not the clauses, but the fact that the trust exists. The omission of Madison's name won't go unnoticed. I'm counting on that, Eleanor replied. She signed. Once, twice, then again, where the notary pointed. The pen didn't tremble. Across the room, Ruth sat in the guest chair, a styrofoam cup of gas station coffee in her hand. She hadn't said much since arriving, just sat like she had through every storm in Eleanor's life, arms folded, eyes alert. When the last document was sealed, she leaned forward, tapped the trust folder with one lacquered fingernail. Now that's real insurance, she said. Eleanor exhaled, finally. It was the kind of breath that only comes after years of held air. Not relief, just the beginning of oxygen again. Her body didn't sag, but her jaw unclenched. The muscles behind her ears stopped bracing for the next blow. I want the file couriered, she said. No digital trail, no leaks, no speculation. Already arranged, Clara said. Messenger picks it up in an hour, hard copy only, direct to the clerk. Good. Are you ready for the fallout? Clara asked, folding her hands. Eleanor reached into her handbag, pulled out the slim voice recorder, and set it on the table beside the trust. I brought fire, she said. You built the firewall. Then let them try, Clara said, half smiling. Ruth raised her cup in mock salute. To trust issues. Eleanor smirked. To trust enforcement. They left Clara's office just before 6. The sun had fallen, but the air still held the weight of heat. Downtown buzzed beneath them, lawyers hustling toward late trains, tourists snapping dusklit selfies in front of lit-up fountains, baristas pulling final shifts behind fogged-up glass. Outside on the curb, Ruth linked her arm with Eleanor's like she always had. Unasked, unspoken. You know what's funny, Ruth said, guiding them toward her car. That girl thought she was playing you like a harp. Eleanor's heels clicked lightly on the pavement. She's about to learn I play piano, 2 hands. They reached the car, and Eleanor paused at the door, glancing up toward the rooftops, where lights still flickered in penthouses above the city. Somewhere, Madison was probably arranging throw pillows and sipping overpriced Cabernet, still assuming she was 3 steps ahead. But the first move was already over. Eleanor had rewritten the board. And the next piece? Waited in the sealed envelope she still hadn't opened. It sat in her purse, heavy as a loaded chamber. And tomorrow she would tear it open. The envelope came by courier, thick, vanilla-colored, official. Clara sliced it open with her letter opener, skimmed the header, and let out a soft, bitter breath. She went for guardianship, Clara said, not looking up. Unfit to manage personal affairs. Petition for emergency conservatorship. Jesus! Eleanor didn't blink. She sat still in the leather chair across from Clara's desk, hands folded on her lap. What's the basis? She asked. Clara held up the pages. Alleged cognitive decline, mental lapses, forgetting to pay bills, neglecting home upkeep. Claimed evidence of paranoia and compulsive hoarding behavior. Oh, and she included photos of your upstairs closet. She's been inside my house. Of course she has. The air in Clara's office was quiet, measured, electric. She timed this, Clara added. Your new trust just went into public record. She's scrambling. Eleanor's voice was even. Let her. Family court. 2 days later, Eleanor wore a charcoal gray suit, no jewelry, her hair pinned up, face bare. She looked like a woman who remembered everything. Madison sat across the aisle in pale pink, flipping casually through a copy of her own petition as if it were a brunch menu. Her lawyer, a thin man in an expensive tie who rarely made eye contact, spoke only when prompted. Jason was beside her. He hadn't spoken at all. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her late 50s, called the session to order. Madison's lawyer stood first. We are requesting temporary conservatorship over Mrs. Eleanor Harwood's personal finances and healthcare decisions. The petitioner, Madison Harwood, has observed increasing confusion, isolation, and dangerous memory loss. In her own words, Mrs. Harwood. I'll speak for myself, Madison interrupted, standing. The judge nodded, amused. Briefly, please. Madison clutched the rail like she was testifying before Congress. She leaves stove burners on. She forgets her bank passwords. Jason and I are worried she'll be scammed, or worse, end up institutionalized when all she really needs is help. We just want to protect her. Jason's eyes stayed fixed on the carpet. Across the aisle, Eleanor said nothing, until Clara stood. We'd like to enter Exhibits A through F, Clara said, her voice clean and sharp. Bank records, trust statements, legal filings, and one signed letter from Victor Harwood's asset manager, dated 3 months before his death. She walked the folders to the clerk with quiet force. My client pays every bill on time. She manages over 12 separate investment accounts. She co-authored the restructuring of her late husband's estate, and by all legal and fiduciary definitions, is more competent than most professionals I work with. The judge arched a brow. Further, Clara added, we'd like to introduce Exhibit G. Victor's testimony. A video recording, dated just weeks before his passing. The screen lit up behind the bench. Victor sat in a soft-lit den, wearing a cardigan and a slight smile. His voice was slower, but not weak. If anything happens to me, he said clearly, don't worry about Eleanor. She's sharper than half my junior analysts, and more ruthless with a calculator. She hides it under modesty. But I've watched her navigate tax law like it's a recipe book. The screen went black. Madison's lawyer muttered something inaudible and sat down. But Madison, she didn't flinch. She just kept smiling, like someone holding a bad poker hand and bluffing on instinct. The judge looked over her glasses. Does anyone else wish to speak? Ruth stood. She wore a navy dress, pinned with a faded silver brooch. Her voice cracked slightly at first, but then steadied like poured cement. My niece runs our bridge club, she said. Every Friday, keeps track of 15 women's schedules, handles the finances, and still finds time to make lemon bars from scratch. She's the reason we haven't descended into gossip and cannibalism. If that's unfit, then the rest of us are legally dead. A few muffled laughs stirred in the gallery. Even the court reporter cracked a smile. Thank you, the judge said dryly. Then she turned her eyes on Madison. Ms. Harwood, she said, you filed this petition under penalty of perjury. Given the counter-evidence, I am inclined to dismiss your request unless compelling, credible evidence is produced. Now. Madison smiled coolly. Your Honor, my concern isn't just the numbers. It's emotional. She's paranoid, secretive. She thinks people are out to get her. The judge leaned forward. Do you have documentation of psychiatric diagnosis? Any formal evaluation? No, but... Then you're wasting the court's time. The gavel didn't fall yet. Instead, the judge looked at Eleanor. Do you wish to respond? Eleanor rose slowly. Her voice didn't need to rise. She's right about one thing. The courtroom stilled. I am secretive. I don't trust easily. I don't share my business unless I have to. She turned, just enough to meet Madison's eyes. But being careful doesn't make me unstable. It makes me prepared. The judge nodded. Petition denied. Case dismissed. Ms. Harwood, you're free to go. Eleanor gathered her purse and rose without a word. As she passed Madison on the way out, the younger woman whispered through clenched teeth, You're not done. Eleanor didn't stop. She only said one thing as she walked by. No, Madison, you are. The second petition came with a different court date, but the same ambition. Madison had switched tactics, filing in the civil division under elder concern, rather than emergency conservatorship. The language was softer now. Protective oversight, concern for future well-being, emotional vulnerability. It was still a knife. Eleanor arrived 10 minutes early, coat neatly pressed, hair smoothed into its usual French twist. She carried a black leather portfolio, nothing in it but the truth. Inside the courtroom, Madison stood already under oath. Pale blue blouse, sympathetic expression. A tissue she hadn't used yet clutched in one hand. Her voice was softer now, too, measured, performative. She forgets small things, Madison told the court. She repeats stories. Once she called me twice in a day and told the same story both times. It's not major, yet, but it's troubling. The judge, a different one this time, grayer, colder, didn't interrupt. He scribbled notes in slow, meticulous strokes. She used to be sharp, Madison added, folding the tissue with practiced hands. But lately, I worry she's isolated. She's so secretive. She could be getting scammed and no one would know. Clara stood as soon as the judge called for the response. No affidavits, she said crisply, just facts. She approached the bench and handed over 3 folders. Exhibit A, financial audits from the last 5 years. Managed solely by Eleanor Harwood, no missed payments, no anomalies. Exhibit B, current credit report, flawless. No evidence of fraud, debt, or third-party involvement. The judge flipped through the documents. Exhibit C, Clara said, voice sharp as flint. A cognitive evaluation from Dr. Samuel Klein, board-certified neurologist. Full mental acuity. No signs of deterioration. She paused before delivering the final blow. And we have one more. Video deposition. The screen came alive. Victor again, this time in a pressed shirt, seated beside a whiteboard covered in estate flowcharts. She doesn't just manage our money, he said. She grows it. I've watched her adjust allocations more intelligently than some hedge fund advisors. Anyone who thinks she's declining hasn't tried beating her at poker or taxes. A faint chuckle rippled through the courtroom. The judge raised an eyebrow. Is this current? 6 weeks before he passed, Clara confirmed. The judge nodded. Proceed. Next came Ruth. She took the stand with a cane in one hand and Eleanor's Bridge Club binder in the other. She held it up before sitting down. This is our ledger, she said. Attendance, dues, venue rotation, meal planning, end-of-year report. All in Eleanor's handwriting. She flipped it open. No errors. Not one. And believe me, if she had forgotten to order the spinach quiche last Friday, she'd have had 5 old women riot in floral sweaters. A low laugh echoed in the gallery. Even the judge cracked a smirk. Anything else? Ruth nodded. Every day at 9:30 a.m., she texts me a Wordle score, in under 4 tries. That's more than I can say for myself. The judge waved her off gently. Thank you. He turned back to Madison. Ms. Harwood, do you have anything else to submit? Madison stood again. Your Honor, all I'm saying is that sometimes she's evasive, closed off, not the way she used to be. Isn't that worth addressing? The judge steepled his fingers. That's not incompetence, that's privacy. She's acting irrationally. No, she's acting decisively. There's a difference. He flipped through the files again, expression hardening. You brought forward 2 petitions within 30 days, the judge said, his voice low and cool. Both rooted in speculation, neither supported by formal evidence. If this continues, we may have to review whether your actions constitute harassment. Madison's expression barely faltered, but her hands clenched the tissue harder. Petition denied, the judge finished. Court is adjourned. Outside, Clara slipped her sunglasses on and exhaled. She won't try this angle again. Eleanor adjusted her gloves. She'll find a new one. You ready for it? Eleanor looked straight ahead, eyes sharper than ever. She hasn't met the version of me that opens envelopes. She reached into her bag, and this time her fingers didn't hesitate. She pulled out Victor's sealed letter, the one she'd carried like a ticking thing for weeks. I open it tonight, she said. Clara nodded. About time. Eleanor didn't respond, because she already knew whatever was inside would change everything. By Thursday, the whispers had begun to multiply. At the Charleston Art Society's fall luncheon, where heirloom silver was polished more thoroughly than most reputations, Madison stood in cream silk and spoke in soft, cutting tones to whoever would listen. "She's bitter, that's all," she told the gallery chairwoman. "Since Victor passed, Eleanor's been unstable, obsessed with paperwork. I'm worried. Honestly, she's not poor, technically. But you know how those things go when you're alone and deteriorating." By the hors d'oeuvres table, she whispered to a retired judge's wife, "The poor woman can't keep up any more. She still drives that awful Saturn. She talks like the IRS is following her." And to the editor of the Historical Quarterly, "I don't want to speak out of turn, but she's not as lucid as she once was. The trust business? A paranoid spiral. You'll see." Colin Abrams heard it all by Sunday. He didn't live in Charleston anymore. He'd long since traded seersucker for spreadsheets and ran a boutique investment firm in Savannah. But when 3 separate board members called him about Eleanor in the same week, he picked up the phone. He hadn't spoken to her since Victor's funeral. He wasn't sure she'd answer, but she did. On the second ring. "Eleanor Harwood." "Colin Abrams," he said. "I'm calling because you've become very popular. Again." A pause. No rush. Then, "Tell me who said what." "Madison," he replied. "She's painting you as senile, broke, delusional." Eleanor's voice didn't tremble. "How sad. And I'm guessing that's not true. All I'll say is," she paused. "Appearances deceive." Colin chuckled. "You were always economical with your words. And generous with mine, if I recall," she said dryly. "You once called me financial napalm in a pencil skirt. I stand by it." Silence passed between them like something ceremonial. "I think I'd like to look into her," he said eventually. Quietly, just for curiosity's sake. Curiosity is dangerous, Colin. Only when the truth is uglier than the question. By Tuesday, he'd uncovered the first thread. Madison's Amex balance hovered just under $43,000. 2 failed payments in the last 6 months. A closed boutique in Savannah, rented under a shell LLC, now defaulted. Unpaid invoices. A bridge loan. Jason didn't know she'd taken out against a fake jewelry line she never launched. By Wednesday, he had her spending habits mapped out by zip code. Country club dues, cosmetic appointments in Atlanta, a luxury bag flipped 3 times between private sellers, all with a downward value trend. And by Thursday, he wasn't the only one watching. The Historical Society's donor committee held a discreet meeting. The art board paused Madison's nomination. The garden club stopped returning her texts. Because the only thing Charleston hated more than scandal was financial instability. Clara slid a folder across the table at Eleanor's kitchen counter. "We're documenting everything," she said. "Libel, character defamation. If you want to sue, we'll have enough." Eleanor didn't touch the folder. She stood at the sink, peeling an apple in one unbroken spiral. Her face unreadable, her hands steady. "I don't want a lawsuit," she said. Clara raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "Too noisy, and lawsuits give her attention. Madison doesn't need a courtroom. She needs a mirror." Clara exhaled. "And what if she sues first?" Eleanor placed the knife down gently. "Then we bleed her dry, in discovery." A beat passed. Then Clara smiled, slow and sharp. "Okay then." She flipped to the next page. "But if she keeps talking, this goes to the next level." Eleanor nodded once. "Let her talk." She reached over and opened a drawer. Inside, next to her checkbook and her spare house keys, was Victor's letter, opened, folded, with one sentence underlined in blue. "If anything happens to me, the file is in the safe behind the grandfather clock." Eleanor turned toward the living room. The clock had been silent since the day he died, but now it began to tick again. The courtroom was smaller this time, less formal, no press, just a stiff judge, a half-dozen chairs, and the stifling air of grudges forced into legal language. Madison's lawyer stood first. This one was younger than the last, hungrier, sharper, dressed like a catalog model. He spoke in rehearsed outrage. My client believes Mrs. Harwood was manipulated into restructuring her estate. The language of the trust, the exclusions. It reflects undue influence, not independent judgment, particularly from her legal advisor, Ms. Clara Beck. He turned to the judge. At minimum, the trust should be frozen while we review the extent of coercion. Eleanor didn't blink. She wore dark green. No jewelry. Her hair pulled back like a battle standard. Clara rose slowly, calm, surgical. We've submitted sworn statements from 2 independent attorneys who reviewed the trust language and confirmed there was no coercion. In fact, she tapped the folder. Ms. Harwood delayed signing for 3 months after it was drafted, long enough for any influence to dissolve. She placed a small USB drive on the clerk's desk. And then there's this. A flat screen behind the judge lit up. Audio only. A familiar voice slithered through the courtroom. Sweet, measured, unmistakable. You're not exactly young anymore. Those care homes suck everything dry. It'd give us peace of mind. Just on paper, Madison, caught in her brunch trap, again. Clara let it play for another 10 seconds before pressing pause. The silence that followed was brutal. The judge didn't look up. He scrawled something with the speed of someone making up their mind. This isn't a negotiation, Clara said flatly. It's a pattern of exploitation, psychological pressure, covert intimidation. My client had to record her own family to protect herself. And now she has to defend herself from false appeals, filed in bad faith, designed solely to wear her down. Madison's lawyer tried to speak. The judge raised a hand. This is the 3rd filing related to the trust in less than 90 days, the judge said. His voice was slow, deliberate, lethal. The claims are unsubstantiated. The accusations are borderline defamatory. And the recordings? He gestured toward the frozen screen. That borders on exploitation, but not by Ms. Harwood. He turned to Madison. The appeal is denied, with prejudice, a pause. Meaning you cannot file again on this matter, ever. Madison's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Jason sat beside her in silence. He hadn't said a word during the entire hearing. His hands hung between his knees. His tie was crooked. His eyes hollow. Eleanor didn't even look at him. She stood as the judge rose, gathered her coat, straightened a loose thread at her cuff. She thought she had power, she murmured to Clara as they walked out. She never did. Outside the courthouse, Eleanor paused under the iron arch of the main exit. The late morning sun sliced through the trees, casting long shadows across the stairs. Jason stood behind her. He looked older than he had 3 weeks ago. Not ruined, just unfinished. Like someone halfway through realizing what had been taken from him, or who. She said it was to protect you, he said, voice brittle. Eleanor turned. It never was. She was scared, he tried again, of losing things. Eleanor studied him, head slightly tilted. You only fear loss if you're holding something you never earned. Jason looked away, and Eleanor, for the first time in weeks, felt something unfamiliar flicker in her chest. Not pity, clarity. She walked past him without speaking again. Back at home, the living room was quiet. She approached the grandfather clock. Victor's file had been exactly where the letter said. Inside the safe, hidden behind the pendulum and a false backplate. She hadn't opened it yet. She had waited, chosen her moment. Now she carried it to the table, laid it down, and flipped the clasp. Inside, a worn manila folder, several notarized documents, and at the very bottom, a photograph she hadn't seen in over 30 years. A woman Eleanor didn't recognize, and Victor standing beside her, smiling. The headline hit like a slap across a wedding album. Bride mocks mother-in-law as broke. Turns out she's a millionaire. Below it, a photo from the reception. Madison mid-toast. Glass raised, grin sharp as glass. Beneath that, Eleanor seated, eyes steady, the camera catching just enough of the moment before silence swept the room. The article ran through everything: the brunch recording, the conservatorship attempt, the trust maneuvering, the court dismissals. But what caught Charleston society off guard, what dropped jaws and clutched pearls, was the dollar amount. 8 figures, discreetly held, real estate, dividends, offshore accounts. A financial profile so clean it glinted. And Madison had called her too broke to buy a toaster. The article went viral within 48 hours. Not across the entire country. This wasn't national news. It was worse. It was Charleston news, the right circles, the country clubs, the garden parties, the museum patrons, the committees that knew which shrimp fork to use, and who had earned their legacy, and who had merely married into it. Eleanor Harwood wasn't a recluse anymore. She was a legend. Reporters circled the Harwood townhouse like moths. Jason was spotted leaving through the side alley in sweatpants and sunglasses, head down, avoiding questions about his wife, his role, and the failed petitions. One journalist tried to get a quote at the university where he taught part-time. He called in sick for 3 days. Madison, silent. No statements, no retorts. Her social media pages went dark. Invitations to fundraisers quietly disappeared. Her name vanished from the Historical Society's Winter Gala roster. A local boutique dropped her brand as an ambassador. Eleanor didn't flinch. She sat at her kitchen table, pouring black coffee with surgical calm. Across from her, Ruth leafed through the print edition, glasses low on her nose, cackling under her breath. Page 6. Oh my God, listen to this. The alleged victim of financial manipulation now appears to be one of Charleston's most private but formidable investors. That's you. I didn't write it, Eleanor said, sipping. Just lived it. Ruth laughed again. You just won the gossip war. By lethal injection. Eleanor shrugged. Facts speak louder than speeches. She stood, refilled the pot, then returned to her seat. Besides, I didn't have to spread anything. She did all the talking. Ruth raised her mug. To letting people hang themselves. You just handed her the rope. They clinked ceramic. Later that afternoon, Claire arrived with a small envelope. She dropped it on the table. Official notice. Eleanor opened it. Her eyes scanned once. Trust validation complete, Clara said. Fully filed. Fully protected. No contest allowed. Not even retroactively. She sat down, stretching her legs out with the casual air of someone watching a chess match that ended 4 moves ago. And you're recording? Clara added. Now on file. Permanently. The judge included it in the written opinion as evidence of strategic coercion. Her reputation is toast. Ruth leaned over. Irony, much? Eleanor didn't smile, but her eyes flickered, just slightly. Let her chew on it. Evening fell. The phone stopped ringing. The online firestorm moved on, already devouring the next scandal in another neighborhood. But Madison's name would linger, whispered with discomfort, cited in caution, a cautionary tale in white heels and bad timing. Eleanor stood by the window, watching the light dim behind the oaks. The manila folder still sat unopened on the hallway table. The photos still unanswered. The mystery beside Victor hadn't gone away, but it could wait one more night. For now, the world finally knew what she hadn't shouted. And tomorrow, they'd learn what Victor had buried. The plaque shimmered under soft autumn sunlight, affixed just below the arched limestone entrance of the law school's oldest lecture hall. The Eleanor Harwood Fellowship for Women in Law. Endowed to protect the clever, the cautious, and the underestimated. Inside, the rotunda buzzed with quiet ceremony. No orchestra. No catered lunch. Just a lectern, a circle of chairs, and 20 students in worn blazers and second-hand heels, eyes bright with the kind of ambition money rarely recognizes. Eleanor stood at the front, Clara to her left, Ruth to her right. The room wasn't packed, but it was attentive. Students leaned forward. Faculty stood in the back. A few reporters flanked the side doors, notebooks in hand. Colin Abrams stood among them. He didn't take notes, just watched. He'd written the headline himself. Real Legacy, Real Wealth. How Eleanor Harwood changed the endgame. No quotes, no gossip. Just facts, asset flows, and the kind of financial integrity even Wall Street had forgotten how to recognize. Clara delivered the opening remarks. Too many women are forced to apologize for being careful, she said. Or for being private. Or for surviving when others expected collapse. She looked at Eleanor without blinking. This fellowship exists because someone refused to be erased. Applause echoed, gentle but firm. Then Ruth took the mic. I've known Eleanor since she was 15, she said. She had a spine before she had shoes that fit. She's not just funding futures. She's reminding Charleston that the people it ignores are often the ones holding it up. Then she grinned. Also, she still makes the best damn lemon bars in 3 counties. More laughter this time, but respectful. Then it was Eleanor's turn. She didn't read from paper. She didn't raise her voice. I've spent a long time in the background, she said. By choice, I like small rooms. Sharp minds, clean spreadsheets, scattered smiles, nods. This fellowship isn't about charity. It's about capital. I don't care what you wear to class or what you drive. I care how you think and how you protect what you build, she paused. Then, this is family now. People who value learning more than appearances, strategy more than noise. A few students wiped tears. She finished simply. You don't owe me, just make someone underestimate you and then prove them wrong. Afterward, the students surrounded her. Some shook her hand, others cried. One simply held her wrist and said, You changed the way I see myself. Colin leaned against a pillar, watching it all unfold. You were never broke, he said under his breath. No, Clara answered beside him. Just busy. Outside the hall, Jason stood in the shadow of a maple tree, hands in his pockets, tie loose, face unreadable. He hadn't spoken to Eleanor since the court's final ruling. Not really. He hadn't needed to. He watched now as she laughed, not loudly, but genuinely, with a scholarship recipient in blue canvas sneakers and a crooked part. He didn't step forward, just watched. And when she turned slightly, half a degree, maybe, she didn't smile or nod or gesture, but she knew he was there, and he knew what she was telling him. This is what legacy looks like. This is what you could have protected. Later, as the crowd thinned and the daylight softened into gold, Eleanor remained behind. She walked slowly through the old stone hallway, fingers brushing the names etched into the donor wall. Not old money, new vision. Names like hers, names that didn't start powerful but became permanent. She stopped at a window, looking out at the trees. The manila folder from Victor still sat unopened on her writing desk at home. She hadn't forgotten it. But for the first time in weeks, she wasn't afraid of what it might hold, because whatever Victor had hidden, whatever shadows he left behind, she had rewritten the ending. And now, she was ready to face the middle. Madison came alone. No makeup, no press, no husband. Just a trench coat 1 size too large, and a desperation that no perfume could cover. She stood outside Eleanor's wrought iron gate, like a ghost who hadn't realized she was dead yet. Eleanor opened the door herself. She didn't invite her in. Madison blinked hard. I just need 5 minutes. Eleanor didn't answer, but she stepped aside. Ruth sat in the living room, knitting something bright and complicated. She didn't look up as Madison entered, just picked up her phone and pressed record. Eleanor gestured toward the couch. Speak. Madison hesitated, then folded herself onto the edge like someone expecting to be electrocuted. I lost everything, she said, voice low. You know that, right? Eleanor stayed standing, Madison's hands twisted in her lap. The boutique deal collapsed. Jason's being reviewed at the university. We had to sell the lake house. I got dropped from the foundation board. She looked up. I made one comment, one joke, At a wedding, people laughed. Eleanor's expression didn't move. I didn't mean it, Madison said, louder now. You know that, right? I didn't think you were. She caught herself. I didn't know you were all this. Eleanor tilted her head. And if I had been broke, would that have made the joke funnier? Silence. Madison's eyes filled. I was trying to be charming. You know how weddings are. People expect speeches, and I was nervous, and... She let the tears fall. Eleanor didn't offer a tissue. You mocked me for laughs, Eleanor said, calm and cold. You weaponized perception, and when that stopped working, you tried legal assault. You tried to bury me alive in paper and lies. It was Jason, Madison snapped, desperate now. He said we had to protect ourselves. I was just... You weren't protecting, Eleanor cut in. You were erasing. The silence between them thickened. Then Madison sat straighter, the tears drying into something uglier. I could sue again, she said. Different angle, different jurisdiction, defamation even. You won't, Eleanor said. Madison stood. Watch me. From the corner, Ruth cleared her throat. You want me to hit pause on this recording? Madison froze. Ruth smiled, sweet and slow. It's running clean. High fidelity. Sounded like you just threatened civil action out of spite. Again. Madison's face turned crimson. You're both insane, she hissed. You think this makes you good people? You think this makes you better? Eleanor stepped forward, still quiet. I don't laugh last, Madison. Madison scoffed, bitter and frantic. I live last, Eleanor finished. Madison stared at her like she didn't understand the language. You don't get it, do you? She spat. You're smug now, but you're old, alone. One day people will stop returning your calls, and you'll realize all your money can't buy you company. Eleanor nodded slowly. You're right, Madison blinked. Caught off guard. I am old, I am alone. Then Eleanor stepped even closer, and in a voice that held no tremor, no rage, just truth. But I sleep just fine, because everything I have, I earned. And everything you lost, you never had. Madison's chest rose and fell like she was choking on her own breath. I hope you enjoy being admired by strangers, she whispered, because you'll die just as alone. Eleanor smiled. I'd rather die alone than live as you. Madison backed away. No one will care about your name in 50 years, she snapped. Eleanor's eyes flicked to the plaque still in the entryway, the one with her fellowship's seal on it. Then back to Madison. Sure they will. Madison turned, stormed out the front door, heels clacking like punctuation marks on marble. When it slammed shut behind her, the sound echoed. Ruth clicked stop on her phone. I wasn't even planning to record her, she said, mildly. I just don't trust beige trench coats. Never have. Eleanor let out a long, measured breath. She's not finished, Ruth said. No, Eleanor replied. But neither are you. Eleanor didn't answer. Her eyes had already drifted to the desk across the room, where the manila folder still waited, where the photograph still asked a question, and where Victor's silence still held weight. The papers were thick, the kind you had to sign with a pen that left a dent in your name. Clara laid them out on Eleanor's kitchen table. No ceremony, just clean lines and irreversible intention. A steaming mug of chamomile sat beside the final signature page. The silence between them wasn't tense. It was earned. Everything's in place, Clara said. All amendments filed. The final estate plan reads exactly as you requested. Eleanor nodded. No flourish, just finality. Madison's name, she asked. Clara tapped the edge of the document. Erased. From everything. Retroactively disinherited. If Jason tries to sneak anything past the legal firewall, it triggers an automatic transfer of assets to the Scholarship Foundation. Eleanor smiled, faint and quiet. Good. I've also added one more provision, Clara said, sliding over a sealed envelope. This gets released upon your passing, 1 copy to the state, 1 to Jason, 1 to the press if you choose. What's in it? A letter detailing the entire story. You won't be rewritten once you're gone. Eleanor stared at the envelope, then pushed it aside. She already tried. It didn't take. Colin Abrams' article landed the next morning. Millionaire Matriarch's Revenge Completed, What Charleston Can Learn from Eleanor Harwood. It wasn't flashy. It was surgical. It outlined the estate maneuvers, the court outcomes, the failed conservatorship attempts. And it ended not with Eleanor's victory, but with Madison's vanishing. A single line stood out. In the end, all the noise faded. But the structure Eleanor built remained. By noon, the article had been forwarded to every donor board in town. By 2, Madison had been removed from the women in business luncheon she once chaired. By 6, the last of her credit lines froze. That evening, Jason came to the gate. No announcement, no call. Just a soft buzz from the intercom. Eleanor watched him from the second-floor window before answering. He looked smaller than she remembered. Or maybe the grief had finally worn him down to the man beneath. She opened the door, but didn't invite him inside. Jason's voice cracked on the first word. "Mom," Eleanor didn't blink. He tried again. "I messed it up. I know. I should have stopped her. I should have—" "You didn't. I didn't mean to choose her over you. You did." He looked away, hands jammed in his pockets like a boy who didn't know how to lose gracefully. "She's leaving," he said quietly. "Tomorrow." Eleanor said nothing. Jason stepped closer. "I don't want to lose you too." "You already did," Eleanor said. Her tone wasn't cruel, just clean. "I'm your son." "You are," he swallowed. "So what now?" Eleanor tilted her head slightly. "She'll never stand in this house again." Jason's shoulders fell. "But I meant—" "I know what you meant," Eleanor interrupted. "And I know what you allowed. That matters more than what you regret." Jason nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." "I hope you are," she said. "And I hope someday you become the kind of man who would have protected me." He didn't ask to come in again. He turned and walked away, slower than he arrived. Eleanor closed the door. Across town, in a rental condo that smelled like new carpet and final chances, Madison shoved the last of her designer clothes into suitcases she hadn't touched since the honeymoon. A half-empty bottle of Sauvignon Blanc sweated on the counter. Her phone lay face down, silent, dark, avoided. The only emails she'd received that day were from creditors, attorneys, and one ex-friend who'd forwarded her Collins article with a single-line subject. "You should have stayed quiet." She zipped the suitcase shut. It groaned. Jason hadn't come back yet. She didn't wait. Back in her study, Eleanor sat at her desk, the same one where Victor's manila folder still rested. She opened it again. The photo, the woman beside him, the smile that hadn't faded despite time or betrayal. And below it, finally noticed, a note scrawled in Victor's handwriting on the back of the photo. "If you're reading this, then you know. There was another chapter, and I hid it because I thought I was protecting you." She turned the photo over again, studying the woman's face. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair, eyes like Jason's. The roses were late this year, but Eleanor didn't mind. She moved along the garden path with slow intention, pruning shears in one hand, a folded letter in the other. September sun filtered through the hedges. Ruth sat nearby on the wrought iron bench with a thermos and 2 mugs, watching her like one might watch an ancient ritual. "Your pink ones are starting to show," Ruth said, nodding toward the far corner. Eleanor didn't look up. "They always wait until everything else is finished." She clipped a fading bloom, careful and exact. No wasted motion. Behind them, the back door creaked open. Victor, Eleanor's estate lawyer, not her husband, stepped onto the patio in a crisp suit that somehow resisted the garden dust. "Morning," he called. "Didn't want to interrupt the harvest." "You're not interrupting," Eleanor replied, wiping her hands. "Just reinforcing." He handed her a folder. "Final trust audit. Assets are safe. Growth projections positive. Nothing moves unless you say so." Ruth poured coffee into a mug and passed it to him. "To lawyers who actually do what they say." Victor raised the mug, ironclad, just like Clara promised. She still checks in? Ruth asked. Eleanor nodded. Once a week, like clockwork. She sat beside Ruth, unfolded the letter in her hand. This one's from a second year at the law school, she said. Full scholarship. Works nights at a diner. Says she keeps the trust documents in her glove compartment in case anyone tells her she doesn't belong. Victor smiled. She's going to be dangerous. I hope so, Eleanor said softly. She read a few more lines, quiet but clear. No theatrics, just truth. Ruth leaned back, closing her eyes. We don't get to change the world, Elle, but we do get to name it. And you name this part right. A long silence, the good kind. Then the sound of gravel under cautious footsteps. Jason, alone. He stood just past the gate, not quite inside the garden, not quite out. Dressed in jeans, sleeves rolled to the elbows, a plastic bag in one hand. Not flowers, just 2 croissants. I wasn't sure if you'd... He stopped himself. Eleanor didn't move. Ruth raised an eyebrow. I'll give you 2 a minute. She handed Eleanor her mug and disappeared inside. Jason took a step closer. I came to talk. I noticed, Eleanor said. He held out the bag. Still your favorite? I haven't changed. Jason's mouth tightened. I have, or I'm trying to. Eleanor didn't take the bag. She looked past him, to the edge of the garden, to where the roses finally bloomed. You said you lost everything, she said. I did. No, she corrected. You gave everything away. You stood next to someone who lied, and you let her speak for you. I know that now. Good, Eleanor said, then softer. But knowing isn't earning. Jason looked down. I want to earn it. Eleanor nodded once, firm. Then start by walking back to your life, she said. Alone, without her, without excuses. Without asking me to pretend it didn't happen. He didn't argue, didn't plead, just whispered, I'm sorry, and turned to leave. At the edge of the gravel, he paused. You still have the photo, don't you? Eleanor didn't answer, but her silence told him everything. Jason left. And Eleanor, finally alone, returned to the bench. She picked up the next letter, unfolded it. This one began, Dear Ms. Harwood, I didn't think someone like you would care about someone like me, Eleanor read. Listen to the birds. Watch the roses in the corner finally stretch open. And under the letter on her lap sat the photograph once more, face down now. But she already knew what was written. There was another chapter, and she would read it, just not today. The envelope was cream-colored, hand-addressed in Madison's looping script. The kind reserved for holiday cards and wedding invitations. It smelled faintly of her perfume. Clinging, floral, defensive. It arrived 2 weeks after her departure. Eleanor stood at the dining room table with the envelope in hand, staring at the curve of her name like it was an insult dressed as civility. Ruth stood by the window, arms crossed, watching without speaking. Eleanor didn't sit. She didn't open it. She simply tore the letter down the center, once, clean, and then again, until it lay in 4 even pieces on the polished wood. Not a word read. Ruth raised an eyebrow. You sure you didn't want to see what lies she picked this time? Eleanor opened a drawer, dropped the torn pieces in a metal waste bin, and struck a match. She's run out. The paper curled quickly, blackened at the edges, then crumbled inward as the flame consumed it. Eleanor didn't flinch. Ruth chuckled, low. She thought she had the last word. Eleanor shook her head. I own the ending. She moved through the townhouse with calm authority, floorboards creaking in a familiar rhythm. In her study, she reached for the leather-bound estate binder, the one Clara had embossed with her initials, and placed the final signed amendment neatly into its tabbed section. The binder snapped shut like a courtroom verdict. She filed it back on the shelf between tax law revisions and historic Charleston architecture. No fanfare, just order. The room was quiet but not silent. Birdsong floated in from the courtyard, and the soft hum of her old refrigerator ticked in the background like a metronome. She leaned against the edge of her writing desk and exhaled. For the first time in months, maybe years, it didn't feel like armor coming off. It felt like weight leaving her bones. She closed her eyes. No visions of courtrooms or trust statements or whispers from garden parties. Just the rustle of rose bushes outside and the memory of a scholarship letter tucked in her kitchen drawer. A knock at the door, then Ruth appeared in the archway, holding 2 mugs. "Black or Irish?" she asked. Eleanor smirked. "Let's pretend it's Friday." Ruth crossed the room, handed her the mug, and plopped into the armchair. You know, somewhere out there, she's still spinning. Still rehearsing her next move like there's a way back. Eleanor didn't respond immediately. She walked to the mantel, adjusted the framed plaque from the university, the Eleanor Harwood Fellowship for Women in Law. It caught the afternoon light and shimmered quietly. "I'm not interested in her moves anymore," Eleanor said. She was never playing the same game. "Still," Ruth said, sipping. "There's a certain poetry to it." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "She mocked you in a toast," Ruth said. "You answered with a trust." Outside, the light shifted again. Shadows lengthened across the townhome's white brick walls. From the second-floor window, the skyline glowed golden in the slant of late September sun. The windows were clean, the locks reinforced. Every room calm, humming with stability. Eleanor wandered into the kitchen, poured herself the last half-inch of cold coffee, opened the drawer, pulled out a fresh letter from a scholarship recipient. This one had doodled hearts in the margins. "Dear Miss Harwood, I've never had someone believe in me like this. I want to be the kind of lawyer who protects women the way you did." She tucked it beside the others, each one filed like gold. Later, as Ruth headed out the door, she paused. "Want company tomorrow?" "No," Eleanor said, smiling softly. "I'm going to read the rest of the file." Ruth nodded. "You ready for that chapter?" "I think so." They hugged briefly, the kind of embrace that needed no history explained. And then Ruth was gone. Evening fell. The lights clicked on automatically, glowing warm against antique trim. The townhouse, once filled with the chill of secrets and strategy, now pulsed with earned peace. No more threats, no more filings, just legacy. Eleanor walked through each room slowly, hand gliding across banisters and spines of books, portraits, and frames. She paused at the foyer, looking once more at the plaque, the sealed envelope from Clara resting beneath it. A backup. A final safeguard. Just in case someone tried again. She turned out the light, and as she stepped into the stillness of her bedroom, folded beneath quiet sheets, her voice echoed only to herself. But she said it clearly, a final line, a full circle, a lesson carved in steel. She mocked me during her wedding speech, calling me broke. But what she didn't know was, I'm worth millions. So I made sure she'd never touch a dime of my fortune. Then she turned off the lamp and slept like someone who had already won.